Well, everyone, welcome again to CIA Catholic Investigative Agency. This is our second episode in this illustrious series. Today's topic is Obama's counterfeit Catholics, and what we're going to be taking a look at is how certain segments of the Catholic Church have given themselves over to becoming involved with a cultural push to sort of advance socialism and a number of other activities within the Church and to a large extent the greater society as a whole, and that these things are happening through the political machinations and people financing them behind the scenes, a kind of a shadow organization. So we're going to get into all of this tonight. The first thing I'd like to say is everything that you're about to see is the product of nearly 600 man-hours of research. 600 man-hours of research. For weeks and weeks, we've been pouring through documentation, federal filings, tax filings, letters, speeches, everything you can possibly imagine. All of this is very well documented. Now, with that little preface, I want to say there's no way we're going to pack 600 hours of material into an hour and a half show. It's not going to happen. So we're hitting all of the highlights. We strongly encourage you, however, to go and check out the part of the site on realcatholictv.com that has all of the supporting information on this. It is hundreds of pages long, links, YouTube speeches, videos, everything. So we encourage you to do all of that. We're giving you just the highlights here. So not everything's going to be covered, but everything you need to know is going to be covered. Our very first thing that we're going to talk about is the definition of what it means to be a Catholic. If you go to the Catholic Catechism, paragraph 834, this is the definition of what it means to be Catholic. And of course, the Catholic Church gets to set the definition of what it means to be Catholic because it's the Catholic Church. Contained in this definition is another phrase, a sub-phrase from Irenaeus, he's a doctor and father of the Church, when he wrote Adversus Heresis. Now, this is the definition, quote, particular churches, meaning individual churches and dioceses, parishes, particular churches are fully Catholic through their communion with one of them, the Church of Rome. For with this church, by reason of its preeminence, the whole church, that is the faithful everywhere, must necessarily be in accord. It goes all the way back to the 2nd century. Now, if you're Catholic, this means that you believe wholly, fully, everything substantially in the complete dogmatic teachings of the Church. Everything. You accept it all of it, or you're not Catholic in any sort of meaningful sense of the word. So this is the debate. This is the unspoken debate as people seek to obscure the definition of what it means to be Catholic. There's no such thing as a liberal Catholic or a conservative Catholic or any of these. These are labels that have been attached to begin to segment populations of the Church. Catholic means Catholic, that's the end of it. There is no this, that, and the other thing. It's Catholic. This is the debate, as we've said. Pope Benedict, when he was still Cardinal Ratzinger, said in a 1997 publication of his called Salt of the Earth that was reprinted, a part of it, an excerpt was reprinted in the New York Times in 2005, said this, at another point, maybe we are facing a new and different kind of epoch in the Church's history, where Christianity will again be characterized more by the mustard seed, where it will still exist in small, seemingly insignificant groups that nonetheless live an intense struggle against evil and bring good into the world, that let God in. Now, Pope Benedict said that a number of years ago. So at the heart of this culture war in the Church right now, what we see is a struggle over the very definition of what it means to be Catholic. And this is key, Catholic identity. So I'm going to state the problem here very simply, the issue. In the wake of the 2004 elections, groups fraudulently claiming to be Catholic sprang up and tasked themselves with deceiving ignorant Catholics into voting for pro-abortion politicians, the vast majority of them being Democrats. Catholics are ignorant of all of this because of 40-plus years of rotten, horrible catechesis and simply not knowing the faith. The bishops in the United States have been nothing less than negligent in allowing these conditions to foster and continue to the point of spiritual and cultural chaos that we're at right now. These groups, these fake Catholic groups, are capitalizing on this profound ignorance to advance an agenda of evil. As such, they are implicit, formal cooperators with evil in the area of deliberately deceiving people about the faith. These groups are fraudulently Catholic. Indeed, they are evil. and they are an outcropping of an antichrist movement to establish a new global order. Now let's be clear about one term here. When we use the word antichrist, Catholics mean this in an entirely different sense than Hollywood movies and histrionic Protestant end-of-the-world predictions. What the term antichrist refers to is an effort on a grand scale on the part of people and their organizations to advance an agenda diametrically opposed to Christ and his Catholic Church. We're not saying any one person involved in this is the Antichrist. We're saying this entire movement has all the hallmarks of Antichrist written all over it. These people, these groups, are not authentically Catholic because their leaders reject dogmatic Catholic Church teaching and are willfully cooperating with evil. They are not tolerant, they are permissive of abortion and pro-same-sex marriage, lobbying for pro-abortion politicians, and advocating for pro-abortion groups. Because they are permissive of this grave evil, as well as others like contraception, any good they claim to do is nullified. Catholics are not called to cooperate with evil on the way to doing something to get some good. Catholic theology has never permitted the advancement of a good by the use of evil. St. Paul advances this in the 3rd chapter of Romans, verse 8, when he says, "And why not say, as we are accused and some claim we say, that we should do evil, that good may come of it. Their penalty is what they deserve." St. Paul, all the way back, this has never been a thing. You can never do some good and allow and actively promote an evil to get a good end. Not allowed. Aquinas, in his Summa, talks about the good of an action being objectively good, meaning intrinsic to its nature. And we need to distinguish here this word intrinsic good and intrinsic evil. A good definition of this is provided to us by Father John Hardin in his Modern Catholic Dictionary. He says in that, "It is an act or intention that of its very nature, essentially or necessarily, is not in conformity with the divine law." There are some things that are always evil by their very nature, and they can never be good. They can never be used to advance good. They can never be participated in. They can never be condoned. They can never be permitted. They can never be tolerated. This is a difference that these groups tend to smear over. It's, in fact, their entire reason for being is to blur that Catholic truth. Now, when we come to the heart of our issue right now, and that is the common good. There is an expression that is being bandied about in political circles and theological circles, much longer in theological circles than political circles, and it is the common good. Before we talk about the common good, we want to talk about one specific issue here. Why are these groups doing this? And we touched on it a little bit. Why are they willing to push some perverted theological sense of the common good? It's because they have a shared goal with a wide-ranging cabal of enemies of the church who are bent on this global takeover and the establishment of the atheist utopia. You don't have to believe my words on this. We're going to show you their words talking about the very same thing. This cabal is using the machinery of democratic politics to press forward their plan, and in order to do this, they must deceive enough voters into believing that widespread intrinsic evils are tolerable, however regrettable, they say, if they advance the common good. Wrong. In order to do this, to advance their agenda, they have co-opted into their ranks notable, very famous so-called Catholics and so-called Catholic organizations to help them blur the lines between their designs and Catholic theology. The idea is to sow confusion. That's the point. That is what their goal is, their short-term goal, which will serve a long-term goal. They actually go so far as to propose that Catholic theology is actually supportive of their schemes. They couldn't be more wrong, and we're going to get into this right now. What does the Catholic Church, the official Catholic Church, teach about the concept of common good, of that concept? From the Catechism of the Catholic Church, number 1906. The common good is the sum total of social conditions which allows people, either as groups or individuals, to reach their fulfillment more fully and more easily. The common good concerns the life of all. It consists of three essential elements. First, the common good presupposes the respect for the person as such. In the name of the common good, public authorities are bound to respect the fundamental and inalienable rights of the human person. In other words, common good isn't what's best for all of us. Common good is what's best for you and me and you, and together we add that up. But it isn't this tipping of the scales that, well, if most people are benefited by this, well, then that's good, even if some people have to suffer. That is not Catholic teaching on the common good. It is based on the individual, the person created by Almighty God, and that is where the root of Catholic social teaching lies. A short while later, the CCC, the Catholic Catechism, goes on to say that it is the political community that is the most complete realization of the common good. This is where it gets recognized. They're the basis for the moral legitimacy of every authority. By refusing to recognize them, that is the rights of the individual, in its positive legislation, a society undermines its own moral legitimacy. We're getting into some very heady stuff here. Notice that the common good is made concrete in protecting and helping each individual person, not some ubiquitous and vague concept of some sort of commonality. The Catholic Catechism 1930 says, respect for the human person entails respect for the rights that flow from his dignity as a creature. And it makes a point of saying these rights are prior to society and must be recognized by it. They are the basis of the moral legitimacy of every authority, as we've just said. It is the Church's role to remind men of goodwill of these rights and to distinguish them from unwarranted or false claims. Now, every single papal document that touches on this issue, stretching all the way back to 1891, directly touches on this issue, brings out this inescapable point. It is about the individual. There's a list of documents. Rerum Novarum, going back to 1891. Quadrissimo Anno, 1931. Mater et Magistra. Pacem in Terris. Dignitatis Humani. Populorum Progressio. Humanae Vitae. Laborum Externs. Solicido Re Socialis. Santissimus Annus. Evangelium Vitae. Deus Caritas Est. Caritas in Veritate. Right down to 2009, Pope Benedict's encyclical Caritas in Veritate. All of these stress that point, beginning, middle, and end. It is the individual. Every one of these stresses that point. It's the Church's teaching on common good, that it's not what's best for the society at large, it's what's best for the least of the individuals among us. Now let's switch for a quick moment to this idea of the collective good. There is a big confusion here. The common good is not the collective good. The collective good is a notion of something that's good to society as a whole, like national parks or the highways or an army and navy to defend your borders and that sort of thing. That's the collective good, something that everybody shares the benefits of while they don't necessarily have any kind of participating action in it. That's a collective good. The common good is something entirely different. However, this confusion that people often have with this serves to advance the agenda of these Catholic groups because they like to conflate and obscure and mix up these two notions on purpose. But where did they get it from? Where did they develop their false theological notion of the common good? We have three what we call gateway documents, how this whole thing began to develop in Catholic intellectual circles. This, because look, common good's been around for a very long time in the Catholic Church. How did it go off the rails in the last 20, 30, 40 years to become this kind of, on balance, what's best for most people? Because that's not what it is. There are three main documents. One was a speech that we're going to get into in a moment given by Cardinal Bernardine at Fordham in 1983, and then two other documents produced by the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops. One was called Faithful Citizenship, a Catholic call to political responsibility. That was issued a year before the 2004 elections. And Forming Consciences for Faithful Citizenship, that was issued a year before the last election. Let's get into this for a moment. The first one appears way back in 1983 at Fordham University in a speech given, as we said, by Joseph Cardinal Bernardine of Chicago. At a lecture series, as an annual lecture series there, he introduced this false concept, and it is a false concept, of seamless garment theology. He advocated the idea that all life issues have the same moral weight. Doesn't matter which particular life issue you're talking about, they all kind of are the same because you're talking about human life. This is what he said. Again, he didn't use the term directly, but others did. All of this came under the title of the consistent life ethic. That's what he called it in his speech. Those are his words, consistent life ethic. The context of his comments, if you can remember, those of you who were alive back in the 80s and you remember this was in 1983. It was against the backdrop of the Cold War, Russia and us and, Reagan and Gorbachev and all these people were sitting there constantly in, Yuri on drop-off, and everybody's building up their nuclear arsenals, and this was the whole thing. And remember all the Berrigan brothers throwing blood on nuclear missiles, and it was this whole context that all of this was happening in. Bernardine has sort of picked up the mantle of the leading liberal churchman in pushing some of the cause of the anti-nuclear crowd. He wanted to give this anti-nuclear movement kind of a theological legitimacy, and he tied it closely to the church's teaching on peace. And eventually it morphed into the teaching on life, including issues such as abortion. What this did was create a moral equivalency between war and abortion, an equivalency that liberals would soon begin exploiting in coming political elections. We've all heard it. Well, you may go on about abortion, but what about the war in Iraq? Or what about the war in Afghanistan? Abortion and war, as though the two are morally equal. This is where that idea starts to begin to concretize. Now, what fell from Bernardine's so-called seamless garment theory in liberal Catholic circles was kind of a mistaken theological approach that war was just as evil as abortion. It was eventually expanded not only to include direct life issues, but quality of life issues like poverty, social justice and peace, and all of a sudden in dioceses all over America, these little social justice offices started popping up all over the place. In every diocese, every chancery had one of them, two of them, and people running around, social justice, peace, social justice. Finally, any issue that impacted directly or indirectly on human life came to be viewed as equal to all other issues, regardless of the question about intrinsic evil. We cannot get away from that as Catholics. There is a moral distinction, even though these people they do try to blot that out. So this totally evacuated true Catholic teaching, real Catholic teaching, and replaced it with a substitute which neglected and ignored authentic Catholic doctrine. Seamless garment became sort of a rallying point for liberals and dissidents inside the church. It started to become more influential in circles of Catholic elites at various universities like Notre Dame and Georgetown and Boston College, until it kind of took over this place of preeminence in the church. The underlying principle in the church in America. The underlying principles were soon worked into various documents and statements and produced left and right by the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops. All of these ideas, and this is why you have to be very careful of the world of philosophy and ideas, because people have things, they start to rationalize them, they mold this, they mold that, it sounds good, it fits my agenda, they start sneaking it in here and there and working it into this document, and then this document quotes that one, and these three documents don't quote that one. All of a sudden you've got this whole library of information, all quoting each other as though they're all authoritative, and none of it's true. None of it's true. What's important to remember here is that the U.S. bishops have a very long history, for a variety of reasons, of being very, very friendly with the Democratic Party. With the exception of the abortion issue, most of the time, they practically walk lockstep with the party platform and all of its talking points. This has created a major problem for many, many Catholics, millions of Catholics sitting in the pew when it comes time to voting. For millions of Catholics, the bishops are viewed as sort of theological surrogates for the Democrats. This is one of the suspected reasons why people like Nancy Pelosi and John Kerry and Ted Kennedy, when he was alive, just used to be able to waltz on up to Holy Communion and no one ever said anything to them. They got to be coddled and ignored, and oh, well, we can't do that, and it's their decision whether they receive Holy Communion or not. No, it's not. Canon 915, but we'll get into that later. Perceptions like this are heightened when the bishops publish a document about how Catholics should vote. So in 2003, during the run-up to the Bush-Kerry campaign, the USCCB produced a controversial document entitled Faithful Citizenship. Sounds very theological, doesn't it? A Catholic Call to Political Responsibility. It was controversial more because of what it did not say than what it did say. It left the door open, many say intentionally, to allow Catholics to vote for either party, despite the support of intrinsic evils by one party, such as abortion and so-called same-sex marriage by the Democrats. It had vague language on purpose put in there. And as you read more and more and you hear more and more about all of this, you come to realize, well, there was a war in the bishop's camp, And the good bishops, and there are bad bishops, the good bishops got voted down, and this is the document that got produced. And it was deliberately vague. It was vague on purpose because too many of the bishops side with the Democratic Party agenda and wanted to push it along. Not all of it, but most of it. These party positions eventually prompted Vatican luminary Archbishop Raymond Burke to flat out call the Democrats the party of death. Good for him. God bless you. So the 2004 elections become kind of a watershed moment in the church in America and politics in general. That night, if you remember early exit polls, those of you who were following, because this was a really hotly followed race, if you remember. People gathered around the TV. The whole, the last election had been, Florida and the hanging chads and all that, and it was this one promised to be just as close. All of the exit polls were showing that Kerry was going to absolutely wipe up the electoral map with Bush. But when the actual returns came in, a different picture started getting painted. All the champagne cork popping and everything that was going on at John Kerry headquarters in Boston at 2, 3, 4, 5 o'clock in the afternoon, all of a sudden the champagne went flat when the returns started coming in. And they started seeing little by little states that were all kind of in the margin. If you remember this now, this was a very tight race. Kerry just needed to win 2 of those 3 states, Pennsylvania, Ohio, and Florida. Bush, I can't say kicked, one handily in Florida. Pennsylvania went as I believe it was a 3-point, 4-point swing for Kerry. And then there came Ohio. And there sat Ohio until midnight, 1 in the morning, 2 in the morning. And then there was the whole charge of, vote rigging and this and that and everything else. And Cuyahoga County provided the difference. And bam, 100,000 votes in Ohio through Ohio to Bush. And the Bush column and that Ohio going in there moved the electoral votes over, and he won the White House. Final polling data, as a matter of fact, revealed that a new type of voter had been identified, and this voter was called a values voter. 18% of people who had answered these exit polls identified themselves as values voters, meaning you can go on about the war all you want and should we be in Iraq and this and that, but I'm concerned about moral issues right here at home, like abortion and things like that. 18% of the electorate identified themselves as values voters. The Democrats had simply not planned on this. They had just missed it. Their sophisticated radar couldn't pick up these voters in advance. They got absolutely blindsided by this. Among these value voters, abortion emerged as one of the leading hot-button issues, actually the main hot-button issue, with the decided advantage of people who were voting on the abortion question voting for George Bush. As a matter of fact, it was the margin of pro-life voters in 2004 that tipped the election to George Bush. Remember the whole stuff going on about, all these Supreme Court justices have been on the bench for 180 years. They're going to have to die or retire soon. The next president is going to start appointing them. And finally, it was in Bush's second term that he actually appointed 2 justices. This point is critical, that it was the pro-life voters voting in favor of getting rid of abortion that tipped the election to George Bush. Democrats were absolutely stunned. They'd been defeated by a group of voters that hadn't even made it onto their sophisticated radars. We said the problem for Democrats was that they'd become perceived as the anti-God party, that there was some sort of God gap, is what they started calling it, because of their support for abortion and homosexual rights and a slew of other liberal positions. In the coming months, they huddled, they had meetings all over the place. The Christmas break was used up for them with, the holiday season greeting break was used up for them in all kinds of political strategies and huddling meetings to figure out what went wrong and how can we fix this. This became the central focus of the Democratic Party planning over the next few months. A wonderful fellow by the name of Howard Dean, who eventually became the chairman of the Democratic National Committee, said on a post-election episode of Meet the Press in December, about a month after the election, this is what he said. We can change our vocabulary. Listen to what he's saying here. We, the Democratic Party, can change our vocabulary, but I don't think we ought to change our principles. There's a laugher. We're not the party of gay marriage. We're the party of equal rights for all Americans. We're not the party of abortion. We're the party of allowing people to make up their own minds about medical treatment. He said this. So you can see there's no sense of change in them. There's a sense of we need to change how we say things, but not what we say. It's entirely different. So what we have here are two different streams. One on the theological side, with the liberal Catholics kind of developing this common good, perverted common good thing, and liberal politicians on the other side looking for new vocabulary, not new meanings, new vocabulary. That does not make them change their underlying principles of support for abortion, contraception, sex education, homosexual rights, blah, 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 blah. So each of these groups kind of feeds the other. The dissident Catholics are looking for a platform from which to launch their twisted sense of common good, and a political party, on this end, desperate for a way to recast itself as a party of values. It was, in the political realm, as we've said before, a political perfect storm. In short, Socialist Democrats needed words to say, and Socialist Catholics needed a voice. That's a dangerous combination. In July 2005, a group called Catholics in Alliance for the Common Good formed as a nonprofit with the following mission statement. Catholics in Alliance promotes public policies and effective programs that enhance the inherent dignity of all. Notice all, not each. That one little word there. Especially the poor and most vulnerable. Our work is inspired by gospel values, not our gospels, and the rich history of Catholic social teaching as they inform pressing social issues of our time. We accomplish our goals through public policy analysis and advocacy, strategic media outreach, and engaging citizens in the service of the common good. Not one mention here about the individual. It's all about the common good, the on balance, the all, not the one. The founders of this group, Catholics in Alliance for Common Good, are two people. One is Alexia Kelly.
Catholics in Alliance for the Common Good is a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization, and we're dedicated to representing and promoting an accurate depiction of the Catholic social tradition in the public square and in the media. We're guided by Jesus' command to love our neighbors as ourselves and rooted in our tradition's unambiguous commitment to the common good. We're neither progressive nor conservative, and we believe that no political party or ideology has a monopoly on moral values. And we aim to be and function very much as a go-to source for the media. So we can link you with members of our Speakers Bureau, which I'll talk a little bit about, who are leaders in the Catholic social justice movement in the United States, working both on domestic and international issues. So when you're working on an issue that concerns Catholic social justice or social issues, please give us a call, and we'd be happy to connect you with leaders who are authorities or theologians, academics, activists working on this. And you can see a great diversity and concern for a variety of moral issues. We know that the media plays a powerful role in defining issues for the public. What we see, read, and hear in the news becomes the reality for millions of Americans every day. Our church and its social mission suffer greatly when attention is turned away from dialogue about the Catholic Church's consistent opposition to the Iraq War, the growing gap between the rich and the poor, global warming, and the millions of Americans who lack health care. These are all issues that are central to Catholic social teaching.
I'd like you to notice how they set themselves up as the authority. Come to us, we'll tell you what Catholic Church teaching is. They don't have Catholic Church teaching, right? She went through that little list there at the end. Not one of those things she mentioned is central to Catholic social teaching, not one of them. When she says global warming, and that's a laugher, the global warming isn't even real. So she checked the thermometers lately. It's been plunging. The temperature's been going down for the last 10 years. So it is not a central teaching of Catholic social justice. Central to Catholic social teaching, as we've said, is one principle that we've already outlined, the dignity of each and every individual human being. Alexia Kelly worked in the bishop's Catholic Campaign for Human Development office for 8 years. Shortly after that, she worked at the Environmental Resources Trust. Then she joined the Democratic National Committee as Director of Religious Outreach, and she served as the religious advisor on the Kerry campaign in the closing weeks of the 2004 election. She also co-authored a book, A Nation for All, right here, and she lays out the whole vision of the common good, and it said how the common good, how the Catholic Church's vision for the common good can save America from the politics of division. The guy she did this with was a fellow by the name of Chris Corzine. I do find it hysterical that she says during her press conference that no political party has any sort of, control. Her entire resume is nothing but the Democratic Party. 2005, she co-founded Catholics in Alliance for the Common Good. That'll be a watershed date we'll come back to. In 2008, she left and became the religious advisor for the Obama campaign. In early 2009, she ran Catholics for Sebelius, an independent group of Catholics who support Kathleen Sebelius' nomination for Secretary of Health and Human Services. And shortly after that, in May, she got appointed to be the director of the Faith-Based and Neighborhood Partnership at Secretary of Health and Human Services. So after supporting Kathleen Sebelius, a pro-abortion governor, she turns on and gets a job with her. Her entire resume is nothing but liberal Democratic causes. So she cannot stand up in front of a group of journalists and say, oh, we're unbiased. She couldn't be more biased. She's absolutely partisan, and so is everybody she's associated with. The major hot-button social issues her party supports are intrinsic moral evils, which stand in direct opposition to Catholic Church teaching. And by the way, Alexia Kelly, whose self-professed, great heartfelt main mission is to liberate the poor, according to Catholic teaching, drew an annual salary from her organization of $110,000 a year as president of Catholics in Alliance for the Common Good. That's more than twice the average of the annual income for the average family of 4 in America. And being somebody who runs a Catholic organization, I wish I drew that kind of salary, but not at this cost. Much more on 42-year-old Alexia Kelly a little later. Her co-founder, a fellow by the name of Thomas Perriello. In 2008, he was elected as a pro-choice Democrat for Virginia's 5th District. Prior to co-founding Catholics in Alliance for the Common Good between 2002 and 2008, he traveled to a bunch of different areas of war and everything, like Kosovo and Darfur, as a consultant for the International Center for Transitional Justice. The International Center for Transitional Justice is an organization whose stated goal is to help third world governments in transition to democracy. That sounds good. It was funded through grants from some of the most pro-abortion family planning trusts and foundations in America. The Ford Foundation, the John T. MacArthur Foundation, the Carnegie Company, the Rockefeller Brothers Foundation, and the like. Together, these groups pumped $21 million into this center that he worked for.
Just go in order. Marjorie, on a couple of the issues you raised, question of abortions. I will tell you that it is a litmus test issue for me. I will not support a bill that includes federal funding for abortions.
Well, he may have said that, talking about the Obama health care bill, but he voted for the Obama health care bill. No great shock there. There was also something else that he said that was somewhat interesting. This is from a man who says holds a Catholic position on abortion. Read his own words here. I firmly believe that abortion should not be criminalized, nor can we allow any action that seeks to coerce women by reducing access to care or making the process less safe. Quick translation. Not be criminalized means legal. Cannot allow any action that seeks to coerce women by reducing access. That means accessible and making the process less safe. This is the Democratic Party talking point that Bill Clinton espoused. This is safe and legal access to abortion. Now, he's spun it around and put negatives in front of it to soften the blow and make it sound a little more confusing. But this guy's in favor of abortion, and when it got to a vote, he voted for it in the health care plan. So he's a liar. Now, moving on. This fellow with Catholics in Alliance for the Common Good is the chairman, Alfred, sometimes called Fred Rotondaro. In May of 2010, just a couple months ago, he wrote an article for the Huffington Post. And in that article, it was called, "The World Needs a New Vatican Council." Well, I'm not sure many people would disagree with that, but not for the same reasons. In this article, he says, quote, it's online, "Gay sex comes from God. I have never seen a rational reason why a woman could not be a priest. Married sex without the intent of procreation is now an evil according to the hierarchy, but does any practicing Catholic under the age of 80 believe this?" In 3 sentences, the man guts 3 dogmatic teachings of the Church. Catholics in Alliance for the Common Good. Well, here's the chairman of the board right here. Gay sex comes from God. Women should be priests. Contraception, we just made that up a few years ago. The treasurer of the Catholics in Alliance for the Common Good is a fellow by the name of Francis Xavier Doyle. He worked at the USCCB for nearly 24 years. See his long resume here. Another board member is a fellow by the name of Tom Chaboya, who also worked at the USCCB, the Bishops' Conference, before going to work for the Obama campaign in 2008. Starting to see the picture? CACG has a speakers bureau that routinely provides speakers for conferences and retreats and meetings all over the country to advance their twisted theology. One of those speakers is Miguel Diaz. You may recognize him because he is now the ambassador to the Vatican, appointed by Obama. Now, let's go back for a moment to Alexia Kelly and the book she co-wrote with that guy by the name of Chris Corzin. You know, if you notice their pictures here, she has Catholics in Alliance for the Common Good. His group, which we'll get into in a moment, is called Catholics United. They're two different groups, but they apparently have the same plant in their office. But they're two different groups. Corzin, got to keep it light. Corzin founded a group called Catholics United, a second, supposedly, liberal Catholic political group, and here is their self-description. A nonprofit, nonpartisan organization dedicated to promoting the message of justice and the common good, since common good keeps popping up everywhere, found at the heart of the Catholic social tradition. Wrong. We accomplish this mission through online advocacy and educational activities, and that's from their website. It's a 501c4 organization. We'll get into that in a moment. It was founded in 2005 with other people who were members of the Catholic Voting Project. The Catholic Voting Project was an organization that was set up to help advance the bishop's 2003 faithful citizenship document. When that election was over, it disbanded, and they got together and they formed this group. He was the executive director from 2005, and he had a fellow named James Salt on his committee that we'll get into as well. Now, Corzin worked as a union organizer for the SEIU, the Service Employees International Union, which is headed up by Andrew Stern, one of Obama's closest friends, who gave, from his position as union leader, $60 million to the Obama campaign in 2008. Corzin also worked with a group called the Democratic Party Faith Outreach Efforts, promoting Kathleen Sebelius, the pro-abortion Catholic governor of Kansas. He's the co-founder and director, obviously, of Catholics United, and he authored this book that we just showed you about. Corzin is deeply tied to the closest allies and cabinet members of the Obama White House. Now, his co-founder, the co-founder of Corzin of Catholics United, is another fellow by the name of James Salt. James Salt, happy-looking fellow there, worked for an organization called Networks, another one of these 501c3 groups. It's another liberal social justice group that saw fit to give an award to a congresswoman by the name of Jan Schakowsky from Chicago, who is pro-abortion and pro-gay rights and claims to be Catholic. His organization that he worked for gave her an award. She has the, if I'm not mistaken, a 100% pro-abortion voting record during her entire, whatever it is, 8 or 9 terms in the House. And his organization hands her awards. Salt also worked in Kansas, just like Corzin did, for this same group to help Kathleen Sebelius, and he was a launching member of Catholics United. Catholics United is a different type of nonprofit. It doesn't have to be revealing about its money. This is the difference between a 501c3 and a 501c4. A 501c3 must file all of its tax documents, and anybody can go find out who gave money to them, how much they gave, who those people are, where the group gave its money to. All of that information is open if you're a 501c3. The advantage to being a 501c3 is people ostensibly will give you money because they get to claim it as a tax deduction. You're a tax-exempt organization. 501c4 works differently because there's much more narrow advantages for people giving you money. Well, the trade-off of that is I don't have to tell you anything I do with the money. I don't have to tell you who gave it to me. I don't have to tell you how I spend it. So there's this trade-off here. So you've got these two groups. This one's the 501c3. Give us money, give us money, oh, give us money, and you can take your tax deduction. And then they start paying this guy who runs that organization, and all of a sudden you've got this little triangle thing going on. So money is filtering over to Catholics United coming from this group. What's the big deal? Well, what does Catholics United do? Well, here's what it does. In a September 2008 radio interview with Sound Authors Radio Internet program, Corzine said the following: "We're not a traditional nonprofit, which means we can do lobbying and political work unlike your traditional nonprofits. We do a little more edgy work." Yes, they do. Translation, we do opposition research. We funnel money to places that the money goes that isn't as traceable because we're taking advantage, legal advantage, of the tax laws here. So what's the work they're doing, these groups are doing? That's a very important question. As a matter of fact, there's an even larger question to ask here. It's kind of the $64,000 question, or in this case, perhaps the $64 million question. It's what are they doing and who's funding them? Who's funding these groups? Where are they getting their money from? We'll answer that question for you as soon as we get back. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Welcome back, everybody, to the CIA, part 2 of Obama's Counterfeit Catholics. So our question we raised just before the break was, who's funding these groups and for what agenda? Well, the answer is a network that has seized control of the Democratic Party. Little history's in order right here. Let me show you something. This is what we call our George Soros network. If it looks like a homicide board, it sort of is. And it sort of is because they're killing the culture on purpose. Now, let me introduce you to a fellow here, George Soros. Now, this is what he said about America. "The main obstacle to a stable and just world order is the United States." We're not making it up. You can go get his book, The Age of Fallibility. He wrote it. That's what he said. The main obstacle to a stable and just world order is the United States. George Soros was a Hungarian-born Jew who emigrated to the United States in 1956, became one of the world's leading hedge fund investors and currency traders. And this is the man who broke the Bank of England back in 1992 by placing bets, so to speak, hedging his bets against certain things. He cleaned up on the British pound, sterling, and made $1 billion. In 1993, he founded an organization called the Open Society Institute. George Soros has quite the history here. I want to show you a quote that George Soros said in the run-up to the 2004 election. He said this in the Washington Post. He said, "Defeating Bush was, quote, the central focus of my life, a matter of life and death." His quote, Washington Post. Soros said, "I'm willing to put my money where my mouth is." How much money, the reporter asked him. Soros would said he'd spend his entire personal fortune to oust Bush if someone guaranteed it. He became obsessed with getting rid of George Bush. So he sets up, this multi-billionaire sets up this organization called the Open Society Institute. Open Society starts giving money by the tens of millions to all of these different groups that help advance his worldview on every stage you can think of: education, environment, law, courts, politics, culture, religion, everything. He starts funding it through all of these other different little groups, this little network of groups. 2008 financial records show, federal records show that the Open Society Institute had almost $2 billion, with a B, billion dollars in assets. Now, as a lead-up to the 2004 election, Soros collected an influential, very wealthy group of socialist-minded power players around him in his Southampton, Long Island beach house, July 17th, 2003, one of those sort of key dates. In the 2 weeks before the Southampton summit, two very important groups come into existence. One is called the Center for American Progress. We touched on that very briefly. And the other is America Votes. First, CAP. CAP is the think tank operation for the whole Soros plan. He recognized that many of the think tanks in Washington were conservative think tanks. And if you remember back in the 80s and the 90s, and all of the ideas that were coming out were all fresh conservative, politically conservative ideas. They started producing all of these different things, and they came up with the contract for America and reduced taxes. And there's all these brains sit around thinking about ways to advance an agenda, and is the agenda good for the country? The liberals didn't really have anything like this. Progressives, they call themselves, didn't really have anything like this. So Soros recognized a need for some little intellectual thing, and he formed it, and it was called the Center for American Progress. It's where the left does its thinking. The person he brought in to run it was John Podesta. You may remember the name John Podesta from the Clinton White House. He served as the president. CAP is the organization for Soros, again, where the left does its thinking. Now, the next group is America Votes. This was also set up the week before this Southampton meeting. This group, Center for American Progress, is a 501c3. This group, America Votes, is kind of an umbrella group that's designed to coordinate the national Get Out the Vote campaign. Now, what is this all being done for? Remember the big picture. George Soros will spend down his last dime if he can defeat Bush in 2004, which means he's backing Kerry. There are nearly 36 groups, grassroots groups, under the control of George Soros and his folks here through America Votes. You'll recognize the names immediately. ACORN, Emily's List, NARAL Pro-Choice, Planned Parenthood, SEIU, AFL-CIO, the American Federation of Teachers. All of these groups are being coordinated under this one group called America Votes. What's America Votes do? America Votes gets out the vote. So all of these great, big, huge, massively liberal organizations that promote teachings directly contrary to Catholic Church are organizing themselves, getting the thing, and they're coordinating efforts to get out this mass voter drive, to get these people to the polls. CAP and America Votes are instrumental in George Soros' plan. One does the thinking about how do we get our ideas, form our ideas. The other gets people to vote for those ideas. Those are two key things, not the only ones, however. So the next week, there is this Southampton summit. It takes place July 17th, 2003. In attendance at this group meeting were the following people. The CEO of Progressive Insurance, Peter Lewis. Progressive, you see the commercials on TV for Progressive Insurance? That's them. He's a billionaire. Two, together with Soros, are the major bankrollers. If you look at our Soros network here, it's George and Peter. These guys are the piggy banks. They fund everything. Keep your eyes on them. Always follow the money. Someone else who's there is a fellow by the name of Rob McKay. He's the heir to the Taco Bell fortune. Benson and Hedges tobacco heirs, Lewis and Dorothy Coleman. Rob Glazer, he's the founder and CEO of Real Networks, also known for the creation of Real Player, if you happen to have a computer that plays music. These people are not poor by any stretch. Also in attendance at this meeting was a fellow by the name of Harold Ickes. If you're a Politico, you might go, wait a second, John Podesta and Harold Ickes, I remember those guys from the Clinton days. Yep, you'd be remembering correctly. From 93 until 96, he served as Deputy Chief of Staff in the Clinton White House. When Hillary ran for the Senate in 2000, he was her campaign advisor. And in November, a couple months, 3 months after this meeting in Southampton, he launches something called the Joint Victory Campaign and the Media Fund, two more groups. Was already said, John Podesta, the former White House Chief of Staff at the end of the Clinton era, is also in this meeting. You should be taking a step back, even if you don't remember the names. You should be going, here's a multi-billionaire with his other multi-billionaire buddy who are gathering very wealthy people on one side of the room in his Southampton beach house, and everybody with all kinds of political cunning and intrigue and everything else on the other side of the room. And they're saying, hey guys, step up to the bar, let's start talking. John Podesta is no small player. This man is as astute a politico as you will find anywhere. He is the guy that heads up Center for American Progress for George Soros. Another guy that we have is a fellow by the name of Morton Halperin. Cheery-looking fellow, huh? Morton is the senior advisor for the Open Society Institute, the $2 billion organization that doles out Soros's money. He was also director of the ACLU office in Washington, D.C. for a good number of years, and he has been involved in different White House administrations, both Democrat and Republican, going all the way back to Lyndon Johnson, another non-lightweight. If you recognize the last name Halperin, here's perhaps why. His son, Mark Halperin, was the director at ABC News for 10 years of their political unit. Oh, look how far these tentacles reach. As a matter of fact, in 2004, he issued a memo that maybe he wasn't aware of the internet back then, but in 2004, he issued a memo to all of the ABC News political correspondents, producers, reporters, and everything. And in that memo, it said explicitly that the Bush and Kerry campaigns were both to be viewed somewhat suspiciously, but the Bush campaign was to be viewed more suspiciously. He said that right in his memo. That memo got leaked, and he's all dancing around trying to explain what he meant and this and that and everything else. The son of Mark Halperin, who runs Obama's Open Society Institute. This is his other son, David Halperin, who also serves as senior vice president at the Center for American Progress. I mean, this is incestuous. It's these same people. He used to write speeches for Clinton and Howard Dean, and he's very openly gay. Now, in addition to these people being at the Southampton meeting, this is the guest list. This isn't all of it, but these are all the confirmed people, is Ellen Malcolm. Who is she? Well, this bright, cheery lady heads up Emily's List. Emily's List is an acronym which stands for Early Money is Like Yeast. It makes the dough rise. It's their little slogan. It's dedicated to electing pro-abortion Democratic women to federal and state offices. By the end of the meetings the next day, George Soros had pledged $12 million, and Peter Lewis, CEO of Progressive, had pledged $10 million to fund a group called ACT. ACT is run by Ellen Malcolm of Emily's List Group and another fellow, Steve Rosenthal. They get a little budget because while Lewis and Soros kick in the huge lion's share of the money, those other people, Taco Bell, also start throwing in, $500,000, a couple million here and there. They walk out of there with this group with a pot of $23.5 million. Now, I want to have a summit one weekend for Real Catholic TV. ACT stands for America Coming Together. And what does it do? It provides a high-tech get-out-the-vote system. It is a 527 group, one of these groups that you can pour as much money in as you want to. They can pay out as much money as they want to, and everything's all fine as long as you play by the rules. The funny thing was, however, they didn't play by the rules because in August of 2007, after the election, of course, these things always happen after the election, they got fined $750,000 by the Federal Election Commission for illegal get-out-the-vote activities. Gee, imagine that. And they finally just closed up shop and ceased operations. They don't care because they'd already accomplished what they wanted to accomplish. They failed in their effort in 2004, but they'd done everything they wanted to do. Now, in September of 2003, Soros and Peter Lewis incorporated MoveOn.org. Y'all remember MoveOn, don't you? Remember Lewinsky and Clinton? Well, MoveOn.org was a site that was founded to just say, it's just Clinton and the whole sex thing, just move on. And that's where it was found, 1998, during the height of all the Clinton-Lewinsky scandal. MoveOn became a great source of public funds. It actually was probably one of the first, if not the first, political website to raise all kinds of money. Little donate button up there in the corner. They kind of blazed the trail right there. And of course, these guys and their network are going, hey, here's a great way to raise money in addition to all of this. So while this is all going on, in 2004, MoveOn launched a 527 of its own. Again, this is all how do we funnel our money to who we want to funnel our money to receive funds for the presidential election, and it called it the Voter Fund. So MoveOn.org starts a little department or a sub-office and calls it the Voter Fund and says, here, pay, make a donation, make a donation. 2006, the Voter Fund was fined $150,000 by the Federal Election Commission because they failed to register as a political action committee. Because that's what all these things are. They're political action committees. So 2 of their groups get fined. One of them shuts down for illegal campaign operations. Wonderful sight. Shortly after this, in November of 2003, Harold Ickes started 2 different political groups, as we said earlier, the Victory Campaign and the Media Fund. The Joint Victory Campaign was founded November 5th, 2003. This is in anticipation, obviously, of the 2004 elections. The JVC is the fundraising organization which distributes the money to ACT, America Coming Together, and the Media Fund. What's the Media Fund? The Media Fund produces and places the ads for Soros' organization. He does all the media buying for, supporting this candidate or this proposition or whatever. They do all the media buys in the major markets, in the newspapers, all that sort of stuff. When you're looking at an ad, for example, in USA Today, and down on the bottom it says, funded by the Voter Project. Well, that seems all innocent enough, right, until you realize it's these guys behind it. So it was formed by Harold Ickes on the same day he founds the Media Fund, and it's run jointly by America Coming Together and the Media Fund. So there's this little trinity of these 3 groups. One gets the money, one moves it. They're constantly just going back and forth with each other like this. It's the chief source of fundraising. That's its job, is to raise funds. It divides those funds it receives between America Coming Together and the Media Fund, which in turn then take that money and distribute it to other groups, other small little groups in neighborhoods, and get out the vote efforts. And this Union Hall was guys to go out there and pay for their gas, to go knock on doors and say, hey, get out and vote. This is where all this is coming from. In 2004, Peter Lewis, our CEO of Progressive Insurance, gave it $16 million, and George Soros gave him $12 million. Just handing out money. I'd like to go to one of these parties one day, huh? Okay. As we said before, it also ran afoul, the Media Fund also ran afoul of the law. This is the determination of the Federal Election Commission. The FCC determined that more than 90% of the $60 million raised by the Media Fund came from labor unions, corporations, or from donors who gave more than $5,000, all contributions barred by federal election rules. Another Soros group fined, busted by the Federal Election Commission for illegal campaign operations. Finally, in 2004, a 7th group, known as the Thunder Road Group, was founded by a fellow by the name of Jim Jordan. Now, you probably don't know the guy's name, but you will know what he's famous for. He's famous for being fired by John Kerry as his campaign director because he botched the whole response to the Swift boating thing. He was the fall guy for the whole Swift boating failure. Thunder Road Group's responsibility is to be the unofficial sort of secretary for these other 6 groups that we've highlighted. They do the opposition research. When all of a sudden something winds up on ABC News, when Mark Halperin is there, and it says this campaign or that campaign, or something winds up on CBS News with Dan Rather about, these fake National Guard papers from George Bush, where's all that information coming from? The opposition research people in the other camp. Collectively, these 7 groups, we call them the Soros 7. They also go by names like the 7 Sisters, the Sinister 7, and the Soros 7. These groups, Center for American Progress, CAP, look at the dates these things are founded. 2003, July 17th, remember, is the date of that Southampton summit. America Coming Together is founded. This is the Emily's List leader, Ellen Malcolm. MoveOn.org MoveOn.org had existed since '98, but it gets incorporated into this group when Soros essentially buys it. He wants an internet presence. The Media Fund and Joint Victory Campaign, a year away from the election, almost 1 year out to the day, form to start funneling money and getting out the vote. Half of these guys are getting fined and eventually, blasted by the FEC for illegal campaign things. And then Thunder Road Group forms in early 2004. So in the space of roughly 6 months, Soros puts together this network, his network, this huge network. It's funded by tens of millions of dollars. So as a little bit of a review here, let's just go through this and look what happens here. In 98, MoveOn.org forms. 2002, McCain-Feingold gets passed and signed. In July of 2003, the Center for American Progress, CAP, forms. America Votes forms a couple days before the Southampton Summit. Southampton Summit happens 2 days later, July 17th, 2003. America Comes Together, ACT, forms directly out of that Southampton Summit. Soros goes and gets MoveOn.org a couple months later. The Joint Victory Campaign and Media Fund form a couple months after that. And Thunder Road Group forms in early 2004. So there's a nice little timeline for you, what happens in the space of 6 months. You look at this whole timeline and you see a nice steady plan of what we're going to do. All because George Soros says, no way do I want George Bush being elected again. What this group becomes is what's been termed a shadow party. Without this network backing you, you do not have a prayer of winning any kind of election in the Democratic Party. It's not happening. What does it do? It starts to kind of form and coalesce under the Democratic Party proper in 2002. It provided the tools and strategy the Democrats needed to win votes. This is its point. Look at the people in this party. Over there to the left, Harold Ickes, John Podesta. These guys had helped engineer Clinton's victory. These guys know campaign. They know what to do to win. And all of this is the brainchild of George Soros. The shadow party makes some observations. It begins to realize, after the election, but begins to realize that there's kind of there's a gap in the voters' minds. They think, well, the Democrats are mean and evil and they're advancing all this liberal stuff. That's about the only thing they've said that's true. They believe the media skewed to the right. They must have never turned on a television in their lives. And that so therefore citizens were generally inclined to be more right or conservative leaning. So they had to do something about that as well. So they said, let's get some tactics together here. So what they did was they set out to rectify this God gap, this ideological gap, using what were really at the time revolutionary tactics. They saturate the new media and the old media with this new image, like Howard Dean. We're not the party of gay marriage, we're the party of equal rights. We're not the party of abortion, we're the party of having your own freedom of choice when it comes to having a medical treatment. They initiate grassroots efforts, get out the vote drives with tens of millions of dollars pumped in by this small little cabal of people, all for the purpose of setting forth the new image of the Democratic Party to the American public. George Soros, in his 2006 book, The Age of Fallibility, when he wrote, "The Democratic Party does not stand for the policies that I advocate. Indeed, if it did, it could not be elected." After all of this effort in 2003 into the run-up to the 2004 campaign, they lose. A lot of money, and it all comes down to those 100,000 votes in Ohio, that one night, that fateful election night in 2004. 100,000 votes. That's it. Which brings us back to this issue of the values voters again, and this pressing need for the Democrats to get over this God gap thing they've got in their head. So, this is where the distorted idea of common good theology becomes useful for Soros and his network, his shadow organization. Shortly after the 2004 election defeat, in 2005, Alexia Kelly, who you've already met, and Tom Perriello launched Catholics in Alliance for the Common Good, with millions of dollars in donations over the next 3 years from George Soros. George Soros is funding Catholics in Alliance for the Common Good. But he's not the only one. As the 2008 campaign, Obama and McCain, fires up, there is a dizzying array of anti-Catholic groups funding Catholics in Alliance for the Common Good. As a matter of fact, more than $1 million gets poured into these people's coffers. so that they can present themselves as the authority on what Catholic Church teaching is. While much of their financial information is available, if you dig deep enough, which we did, Catholics in Alliance for the Common Good never actually reveals that the vast majority of its support comes from Soros and his allies. So, we're going to look specifically at just money given to them in the election year 2008. Open Society Institute gave them $100,000 in 2007 and another $100,000 in 2008. I want to show you another board here. The only way to draw this out is to literally draw a picture.
Oh my God.
Yeah, it gets a little confusing sometimes, doesn't it? In the center here is Catholics in Alliance for the Common Good. So this is why people don't do this at home. Do not do this at home. Professional researchers have done this. All of these different groups have given all of this money to Catholics in Alliance for the Common Good. So, Open Society Institute gives them a couple $100,000. The next group up is ARCA. ARCA has $43 million in its fund. It gives $75,000 to Catholics in Alliance for the Common Good. If you want to know what kind of organization or foundation you're dealing with, all you have to do is open up their things and see where they give their money to, what other groups they give their money to. No group is going to give tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of dollars to a group that it disagrees with philosophically. So, what does ARCA do? ARCA routinely gives money to pro-abortion, pro-same-sex marriage groups. One of them, for example, is something called Women Voices, Women's Votes, which also supports abortion, contraception, as well as Saul Alinsky community organizing outfits. The next group, Tides Foundation, gave $55,000, as we've demonstrated here on our board also. I know you saw Tides. Tides has nothing to do with Tides detergent that we know of. Tides is run by a fellow by the name of Drummond Pike. Yeah, recognize that name too, right? He's a close associate of George Soros. Tides is very interesting because it's a pass-through group for other foundations who want to give their money to some more very wild, liberal, progressive organizations but don't want to be seen as doing that. So they make a donation to Tides, and then, so to speak, Tide cleans the money and passes it on to these other wildly liberal groups. One of their directors, one of Tide's directors, is a fellow by the name of Wade Rathke. Wade Rathke, you might remember, is one of the co-founding brothers of Acorn. Tides, which has a bank account of over $200 million, gave Catholics in Alliance for the Common Good $55,000 in 2008. It also gave hundreds of thousands of dollars to other anti-Catholic groups like CAP, Center for American Progress, the John Podesta-led think tank, $75,000 as well for the Estray Lesbian Foundation for Justice, almost $40,000 there, and the Bisexual Resource Center Rainbow Community Center. And of course, what group would be complete, wouldn't have its liberal bona fides if it didn't give money to Planned Parenthood? Tides gave $60,000 to Planned Parenthood. The next group that gave money to Catholics in Alliance for the Common Good is the PBL Fund. This is Peter Lewis. This is Peter Lewis's group, Progressive Auto Insurance guy. They doled out about $50,000 to Catholics in Alliance for the Common Good. Lewis gives to all the usual pro-abortion, pro-gay suspects as well. The Bauman Family Foundation gave Catholics in Alliance $50,000 as well. Let's see, where's Bauman? Bauman, $50,000. They also gave money to Tides. These groups all give money to each other. They gave money to Tides, which happily passed it on immediately to Women Voices, Women Votes, which is a pro-abortion group. The Dallas Foundation gave another $15,000 to Catholics in Alliance, as well as tens of thousands of dollars to Planned Parenthood, as you can see right here. Planned Parenthood, Sojourners got $100,000, New Democracy Project, all of these are all these liberal anti-Catholic groups. That's just a sample of how the money flies around these organizations. Now, don't forget the Catholics United, the 501c3, this group right here, the fake Catholic group, also gets donations, but because of their federal filing status, we don't know how much they get, where it comes from, or how they dole it out. But we do know from Chris Corzine, remember his quote, remember what he said? We do edgy things. Yes, they do. You don't have to be as revealing, they're funny. But when you consider that Chris Corzine is also closely aligned with Alexia Kelly and runs in the same circles and draws a paycheck from her organization, it's logical and it's reasonable to assume that they have many of the same financial backers. Now, let's turn our attention for a moment to some of the actual personalities running the show for Soros' shadow organization. Current Democratic Congressman Tom Perriello. You mentioned that he was a nice, wonderful, bright guy, graduated from Yale. He's not very old, he's in his 30s. When he was at Yale Law School, he was on a teaching fellowship from the Open Society Institute, working in West Africa. OSI, Open Society Institute, is George Soros' big, great $2 billion funding group. Later on in 2003, at the young age of 29, what a mature fellow, he co-founded a nonprofit by the name of Respublica, a 29-year-old, starting up a nonprofit organization. Respublica is dedicated, it says, to supposedly improving the world through government intervention. It's funded in part, you guessed it, by George Soros' Open Society Institute. 6 months later, in June of 2004, Perriello co-founds another nonprofit. This guy's busy. This one's called Faithful America. It's dedicated to the unified commitment to restore community and uphold the common good in America and across the globe. That's its own words. All of a sudden, the common good starts making it into this political lexicon now as well. Faithful America got significant strategic advice from Harold Ickes. Harold Ickes is the guy who's the key player in Soros' Southampton Summit and who co-founded 2 of those 7 organizations. This is Tom Perriello, by the way, now remember this, one of the co-founders of Catholics in Alliance. The next year in 2005, he and Alexia Kelly co-found Catholics in Alliance for the Common Good, as we've said, getting $200,000 from George Soros. In 2007, he takes Faithful America, which is a website, and aligns it with Faith in Public Life, another outfit. Now, he doesn't start this one, but he kind of merges his group into it. It's a leftist, and it describes itself as a leftist ecumenical common good organization, also funded by George Soros and dedicated to political change. Look how all of a sudden it's become very convenient for this money and these terms to start marrying themselves together. On the board of Faith in the Public Life is Alfred Rotondaro. You remember Freddie? Freddie's the one who says gay sex is from God. Rotondaro is also a senior fellow with the Center for American Progress, CAP. Another CAP person, Reverend Dr. Susan Thistlethwaite, is a minister with the United Church of Christ. She's a big proponent of homosexuality, and so is that religious organization. She's also on the board of Faith in the Public Life, and she's been a keynote speaker at the Planned Parenthood Interfaith Breakfast. I'm not sure what you do when you go to a Planned Parenthood Interfaith Breakfast. I'm not sure what you pray for. But we're getting into a little detail here with you on Perriello to show you that while this guy goes and founds an organization called Catholics in Alliance for the Common Good, every single person this guy hangs out with is dedicated to tearing down Catholic Church teaching. And they put their money, lots of it, where their mouths are. Perriello's association with these groups puts him knee-deep in the kind of leftist anti-Catholic circles in organization after organization and associate after associate. You get the picture. In January of 2007, he hooks up with MoveOn.org and founded yet another nonprofit called Avaz. Avaz is dedicated to forming an internet community to advance social justice and the common good. In its first year, more than $1 million pour into the accounts of Avaz. A year later, more than $4 million comes flying in. And it is a 501c4. So the donors, nobody has to know, and where their money goes, you can't find out. The chairman of the board for Avaz is also the head of MoveOn.org's Political Action Committee, Eli Pariser. That's the guy who said of the Democratic Party, we bought it, we own it. So when you step back and look at Tommy here, we see a Soros surrogate who's in bed with dozens of key players and groups in Soros' shadow network, his operation, who is one of the two key players in founding Catholics in Alliance for the Common Good. So when it comes to fidelity to Catholic Church teaching, what does Perelio have to say for himself? Well, we already saw his quote earlier. I'll refresh you. I firmly believe abortion should not be criminalized. Abortion should be legal. Nor can we allow any action that seeks to coerce women by reducing access to care. It must be legal and it must be accessible, or making the process less safe. Safe, legal, accessible. From the founder of Catholics in Alliance for the Common Good. He believes in safe, legal abortion. Now let's turn our guns to Alexia Kelly for a second. This is what the other co-founder says. She says, research supports a comprehensive approach that includes providing accurate information about contraception and abstinence as complementary, not competing strategies. Oh, really? Oh, really? The two founders of Catholics in Alliance for the Common Good reject church teaching with regard to abortion and contraception out of their own mouths. We didn't put this in. This isn't somebody whispered this to us. This is from a press release, and we're happy for you to go look at it. We have all the material available. And they accept millions of dollars from groups that hold the same positions as well regarding homosexual rights, same-sex marriage, abortion, everything. This group is not Catholic. It isn't Catholic in the least. They falsely have portrayed their positions as compatible with church teaching, and they posit that it now becomes possible to vote, if you're a Catholic, to vote for people in this party because of the common good. Now, I want to take a quick little look here at this sort of convergence between politics and the theology of the common good. CACG and CU, Catholics United, are obviously committed to this false understanding of the common good. Matter of fact, one of them even has it in its name, Catholics in Alliance for the Common Good. On the political side, in April of 2006, CAP, Center for American Progress, did a research report. This is following the disaster of the 2004 elections. What are we going to do? What are we going to do? This is a few months before the 2006 midterm elections. We need to recast ourselves, and the first time we're going to get the opportunity to kind of test the waters with this common good thing is the 2006 elections. So let's get out there and start kind of test marketing the idea. They said they needed to adopt the idea of the common good as a political strategy. After this report gets released, they have this great big huge conference at Georgetown, Catholic Georgetown University. And the conference was called Securing the Common Good, a Vision for America and the World. Who gave the keynote address at this? None other than Bill Clinton himself, who trots out the idea of the common good. October 18th, 2006 is our date. Take a listen.
I think the common good approach on national security worked. Now, the same thing works in politics. I think the central challenge to American politics today is that what I would call the uncommon good approach has been so successful.
They bring out the big gun himself. He tests it. In a number of races down south, they have these guys, members of these 7 organizations, kind of reframe speeches and throw in mild references here and there to God and this and that. And all of a sudden, the Democrats come out looking like they're religious all of a sudden. This is a finely honed message that rose up from the ashes of the 2004 destruction when they all thought they were going to win. Imagine how mad these guys were after they poured hundreds of millions of dollars into that election and they lost. What's going on here is absolutely crystal clear. A twisted notion, and because it's twisted, it's not true, of Catholic teaching on the common good, which is what? Rooted in the human dignity of every individual person. That has been hijacked by these leftist Catholic groups and delivered over to other groups, these groups, the Soros Network, as a tool for George Soros and others like him and his henchmen to propose a worldview that is diametrically opposed to the Catholic Church, but looks like, to the untrained ear and eye, that it might be palatable. So for the moment, they're content, and I do say for the moment, they're content to use the mechanisms of politics by sort of convincing enough Catholic voters that you can vote for this agenda and this sort of abortion-accepting stuff because, well, the common good says that, well, you're just going to talk about abortion and maybe, gay marriage, but look at everything we're fighting over here. There's poverty, there's justice, there's war, there's peace, there's this, there's that. As if to say, well, we've got 17 issues and that side only has 2. So they're not really Catholic and we really are. What they do not tell you is that these issues are intrinsically evil. They deliberately avoid that kind of language. And they conflate and confuse the notion of the common good and make it as the collective good. And this twisted theology is what that network needed to secure its victory in 2008. And that's what it did. No one ever gets into the White House without the Catholic vote. Doesn't happen. So they say, well, you know what? Obama, funded by these guys and all his allies, sit down and say, we don't need to win all of the Catholics. We need to win enough of the Catholics. It's called the peel away strategy. We just peel away 2 or 3% from this group, and 2 or 3% from this group, and 2 or 3% from this group. And it's like the old adage, mind the pennies and the dollars take care of themselves. They get a little bit here and a little bit there and a little bit there, and they win. And that was exactly the strategy. Confuse and confound enough Catholic voters, and it worked. This time, in 2008, 54% of Catholics voted for Obama. 54%. And the Catholic Church is very clear in her teachings about what is morally acceptable. These Soros-run organizations require a little more digging, but every now and then, in a moment of clarity, you get the truth even from them, because you can't keep the truth always buried. It's kind of the nature of the truth to come out. So remember that comment that George Soros made, we showed you back at the beginning of this segment. The main obstacle to a stable and just world order is the United States. Think about this now. This is the message from this show. George Soros and his allies have a view of the world that they want to happen, and they have the money to make it happen. They know in order for this worldview to happen, the domino that needs to fall is the United States. In order for the United States to fall, you have to get the Catholic vote because you have to get control of the White House. In order to get control of the Catholic vote, you have to twist and deceive and lie and cheat enough Catholics so that you have offset the good ones and the vote tips to them and all the dominoes start to fall. This is what's going on. So whoever said don't mix politics and religion, please. George Soros and his allies inside and outside of the church got Barack Obama elected with the goal in mind of advancing his self-stated New World Order. His self-stated New World Order. So we're going to take a look at a little timeline here. The other timeline we had was just this one set of events. Let's look at this one. So what happens? He launches his plan in 2003 with an eye on the 2004 elections. Remember that. Coincides with the release of the USCCB's Faithful Citizenship document. Very vague, confusing language. Next, Bush defeats Kerry. They're stunned. They don't know what to do. Shouldn't have happened. Where did we go wrong? There's a God gap. We got to fix this God gap. Catholics United forms, Chris Corzine. In July of 2005, Perriello and Alexia Kelly form Catholics in Alliance for the Common Good. Why are they doing this? They're preparing the groundwork for this concept to be used and distorted in the service of a political goal. This is when CAP releases that politics of definition report. They say we have to adopt this as a political strategy. The next thing that happens is Bill Clinton gives this address at Georgetown. Who at Georgetown lets him go up and do this? Should have gone to Notre Dame. Oh, no, wait, we already have one of those disasters. And I went to Notre Dame, as many of you know. And Obama wins, securing 54% of the Catholic vote. They learned well after 2004. They got it. And they brought in this entire network. If you go over here and you take a look at this network of people, look at all of these Catholics, supposed Catholics, in the service of this entire network. Kathleen Sebelius, never met a child she wouldn't abort. Tom Perriello, this guy's a disaster. This guy isn't Catholic. He turns on and says safe legal abortion. Alexia Kelly, contraception's perfectly fine as a strategy for, right alongside abstinence. How do you say that to a 12-year-old? Seriously, how do you say that to a 12-year-old? Now, don't have sex, but if you do, here's a birth control pill. Chris Corzin writes a book with her. Alfred Rotondaro, down here, chairman of their group. Gay sex is a gift from God. Catholic? Are you kidding me? Catholic? This should be a group of atheists. The Catholic bishops in America need to put an end to this, and they need to put an end to it now. I'm more than happy to stand up here and have benefactors help us fund research teams and pay for our electricity bills and everything else. Laymen should not be standing here doing this. We're happy to do it, but we shouldn't be doing this. Where are the bishops talking about this? Where are the bishops? I'll ask it again. Where are the bishops? Here are some quotes. The Archbishop of Chicago, Cardinal Francis George, said, "One cannot favor the legal status quo on abortion and also be working for the common good." That's very true. You can't. Then why aren't you excommunicating these people? Why are they being allowed to call themselves Catholic? You're a cardinal in the church. Kick them out. Another high-ranking notable cleric in the church, Archbishop Charles Chaput of Denver, said specifically of Catholics in Alliance for the Common Good, they do a disservice to the church. I'm sure those words wounded them deeply. Excommunicate them. Words, as we've seen for the past 45 years, mean absolutely nothing if you're not going to back them up. What's needed is action. That's the end of the story. Absolutely the end of the story. While the bishops may be reluctant to say anything really kind of, forceful to these people don't feel the same way about saying something to them. A couple of weeks ago, Nancy Pelosi told the bishops, Pope Nancy told the bishops that they need to start preaching about immigration from the pulpit and order their priests to start preaching about immigration reform from the pulpit because this is a Catholic social teaching and they need to be enforcing it. Nancy Pelosi gives them orders, but for her, well, we have to be charitable. As long as they keep appeasing these groups and these individuals, America, not because of political reasons, but through political machinations, is going to continue to deteriorate. There was a very interesting article in the Washington Times, I believe it was last weekend, by a Baptist minister. And that Baptist minister said in that article that right now America is deteriorating. This is a Protestant! saying America is deteriorating, and he asked the question, where are the Catholic bishops? A Protestant minister. Where are they? Yeah, praise God. Now, to paraphrase Cardinal George himself, remember his quote was, "One cannot accept the status quo on abortion and still be fighting for the common good." I'd like to rework that just a little bit. One cannot accept the status quo on remaining silent with heretics and deceivers in the church and still claim to be working for the salvation of souls, the real common good. Now, lest you think I'm just some upstart, if you happen to be a cleric or something watching this, and I'm just some big-mouthed, Irishman up here shooting off my mouth about all this stuff, I will gladly defer to one particular bishop's view of things. Happens to be the Bishop of Rome. And he said, just a little over very shortly ago, a couple of weeks ago, he said, "Nor does it have to do with love if heresy is allowed to spread and the faith twisted and chipped away as if it were something that we ourselves had invented." God bless the Holy Father. We also have from the Vatican here a very short clip I would like you to see. This was the Pope saying, they're just getting ready to wrap up here, just a couple more minutes. This is the Pope just saying what Catholics need to do in the political realm. Go ahead and play it.
There is a need for authentic Christian politicians, but even more so for lay faithful who are witnesses of Christ and the gospel in the civil and political community. This demand for the formation of involved lay people must be very present in the educational programs of the ecclesial communities.
Get involved, Catholics. Get involved. That's what he's saying. The one thing that all of these Catholic groups will say with regard to abortion is that, well, we don't like abortion, and we really need to try to reduce it while we're working on social justice and everything else. So we're going to elect a man and let him surround himself with people who are interested in reducing abortion, because they said they're interested in reducing abortion. So how does the reduction in abortion argument fare after Obama's been in office for about a year and a half? Well, let's take a look. 3 days into his office, he overturns the Mexico City policy ban and starts using your tax money to pay for children being killed overseas by the hundreds of thousands. Not too long ago, he lifted the ban on abortions on military hospitals all over the world, U.S. military hospitals all over the world. Your tax dollars being used to pay for it. We all know what happened with the health care bill. He signed that, lied, made up some garbage about the executive order. There's no truth to that, and he knows it. That wouldn't hold up in court. That wouldn't hold up in a kangaroo court, much less the U.S. Supreme Court. He has sent Joe Biden, his Catholic vice president, to Kenya on a couple of occasions. Kenya is in the middle of a constitutional vote, and Biden went over there with the express mission to say, if you Kenyans vote for this constitution, all the foreign aid dollars will start flowing to you. Guess why? Because that constitution makes abortion legal. Obama isn't about reducing abortion, and these people know it. Please, this guy went to Yale. These people, it's ridiculous. To sit there and pretend that they think he's about reducing abortion. Hillary Clinton, about a year ago, sat in front of the House Armed Services Committee and was peppered by questions from Republican lawmakers because she kept using dodgy language. And finally, Representative Chris Smith said, "When you're talking about women's health, what do you mean?" And she said, "Well, we'll get right to it. We're talking about access to abortion. I'm sorry, you feel one way, we feel another. We're the ones in charge, and if we want to promote that around the world, then we're going to promote it." Wow. They're pro-abortion. They have nothing to do with reducing abortion at all. This reduction argument is totally false. Maybe out of a sense of charity, some would call naivete, we will say perhaps the majority of the U.S. bishops simply don't realize this. I find that hard to believe, but they know what they're getting with this guy. They know what they're getting with this crowd. They know Catholics in Alliance for the Common Good and Catholics United and these other groups going around calling themselves Catholic are anti-Catholic, anti-Christ. They know that. And they must do something to stop this now. This is an evil co-opting of the truth of the faith given to us by Jesus Christ, protected by the Holy Spirit, and it is not their church. This church belongs to Christ, and they have a duty and an obligation to tell the truth no matter what the cost is to them. Souls are at stake. There is a vast, closing thought, there is a vast army, well-financed, billions of dollars arrayed against Christ's church. The gates of hell will not prevail against it. It will not prevail against it. But we are in one hell of a fight. And you guys, every one of you are soldiers, and you were baptized and you were confirmed to this end. Get in this fight and get in this fight now. God love you.